Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation, looking for the stabilizing syllability, the spelling of sensorality. What is sensorality? So to start, just kind of restating the fundamental theorem of physics. Obviously it's changed quite a bit, as well as the fundamental theorem of linguistics. Again, they all changed. They're very clear hierarchical statements to me. It is not done haphazardly. But from rhythm to algorithm, right? The inverse of rhythm is vibration. It is a physical limit. All things are moving, and if you were to try to limit something, right, we have an absolute numerical limit, the inverse of the speed of light. But in general, the physical concept of limiting motion creates vibration. And the opposite of that, if we take your phone and you turn it on vibrate and it vibrates with a lot of power, a lot of intensity, it will physically start to move. It will change its position. And so rhythm is the inverse of vibration. Vibration being the minimum, and then rhythm, the maximum. There should be some, again, physical argument. All of these steps have been made before. But again, how, like acceleration, to accelerate the fastest, you form a rhythm. To do any physical process most efficiently, you form a rhythm, but there is some upper limit to how fast you can move. That's the speed of light, but anything with mass, which is everything, again, light is some sort of, again, intuitive conceptual limit. The point being is there's an acceleration limit. You can only go so fast depending on your mass and how much mass you can push against. Right? If I'm here on Earth and I walk, right? If I didn't have the Earth to push on, I couldn't like move. And so the fundamental theorem of physics, rhythm is the inverse of vibration. Now for the fundamental theorem of linguistics, again, fundamental theorem, the most comprehensive statement we can say about a given section of ontology. And so sensorality is the inverse of sensorality, the S and the C. And so again, we're trying to pair this linguistic structure to direct physical result. And so that is kind of where we, renormalized our brains. We put our heads in the right places. But it is very important to return to this idea that I've said multiple times. It's probably like the least, I don't want to say the least intuitive, but the least time I spend on, but language is completely general. And so what that means is, right, my name is Brad, I was born in a certain culture. I speak English as my first language. I didn't grow up in India speaking Hindi, or Russia speaking Russian, or Estonia speaking Estonian. And so, right, could I have solved this if I was in a different country? And the answer is yes, because again, experience is such a more unifying thing than language, right? You experience a traumatic event with somebody from a different country, you don't speak the same language, you're still bonded, you still understand each other, because body language, action speaks louder than words. Body language has more meaning, right, than words a lot of times, right? When you're with somebody you understand, or you're good friends with, or your partner, you don't spend every waking minute like filling the dead silence with like words. But language is completely general, meaning, just to use a little analogy, if you have a stream and you want to get to water, and there's 5 paths, and there's one that's most efficient, one that's least efficient, and then some in between, but all of them are, reasonable. Right? If you had, 5 weeks to get to a water source or your tribe dies, maybe path 1 gets you there in 1 day, the other one gets you there in 1 week, but you have 5 weeks. And then 3 other ones get you there in, 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days. It doesn't really matter which path you take. There are some that are more efficient, meaning for language, again, most readily available, the sound, like the consonants n, n, to negate something, niet, no, so on and so forth. And so maybe that's the most efficient. There is going to be some sort of pairing of resonance to consonants as to, how we've related certain letters, but meaning in the same way you have, again, I don't know, doma in Russian or house in English. Like we literally have different sounds for the same exact thing. And so the language is completely general. That kind of elicits that. And now for this proof, what we're doing here, like I don't think any other great scholars were going to derive the faget avec no baguette. Probably wasn't going to use that linguistic structure to demonstrate what a faux pas is and how there's no really inherent contradictions to language. And so, point being is whatever, right, proof establishes a fact, but it's subjective. What I mean by completely relative is it's subjective to me. Obviously, I'm Brad. I'm, again, running around here. I have experiences in the world. I was born into a certain culture, but I had to tell a story. But for a mathematics or a physics proof, and again, what I've done is way outside of, again, we've demonstrated the complete logical structure that you can describe experience with. And so it doesn't matter, like, it is what it is this general form, and we're making this more specific, right? Sensorality is our specific solution. We've already built out the entire general solution, general framework. And so the point being is all of these steps we've made, it's this contraction of the logic in which that's where we would hit all of the same answers, right? The unique difference between 2 points being a line, the spelling of these different words. But where you start to form this logical structure is completely up to you, right? Because you're still going to use language. There's going to be inherent structure to that because of order. It doesn't matter what language really you even start in to articulate these concepts. And then you can show, again, the consistency of the language with the letters themselves. And so what I'm saying in Fogget avec no baguette and needles needlessly produces needles sly. That's me contracting my own logic that I've put out into the world to demonstrate these properties. And so back to the analogy of the stream, there was probably some consonants why N is, the most efficient, or why, negation is that consonance, that sound. But if it wasn't that, all of the other streams are extremely viable. And so meaning, there's no absolute, the only thing that's absolute is existence, right? I am a real person, I have a size, this has a size, and then we're just using things to represent that. And because of this physical opposition, we have completeness. So the language itself can and does show internal consistency, but it's completely subjective. Again, showing the contraction of the logic, you get to the same proofing, but it doesn't really matter where you start. You just start with any words in any language, and you kind of just, again, demonstrating the self-consistency of language that you presented. And in this case, it's me, Brad. And so that is what complete generality means, is this, again, you cast out a logical net, so to speak, and it doesn't matter where you start. And then when you bring all of that logic back in, that is when you produce the actual, again, the logical proofing, you guys cannot even differentiate. But each one of these steps, again, it's the same poignancy. That's why I'm making videos about these different steps. And that's why I've sent you all of those different emails, were all unique enough for me to send to you. And so we're just at a point where you guys just can't do science. You guys can't do analysis, which is much broader than just what you guys have identified as mathematics. And so language is completely general, and you can demonstrate that internal consistency. That is what we are doing now. And then absolute meaning doesn't exist, right? Absolute size does. I am definitely here. That camera's definitely there. It definitely has different weight. But these associations of what sound means what experience or what thing is that's the evidence of different languages, right? You have different word for house in different languages, different sounds, but it means the same thing. And so it's still consistent, right? A lot of people speak French, a lot of people speak Russian, a lot of people speak English, and they understand one another. And so you don't have absolute meaning, not in the language itself, evidenced by these different languages with different words for the same things, and there's no absolute meaning in proofing. And so there are right answers. And okay, so I want to kind of take that back, what I just said there. There is absolute meaning like the words representing physics but it's not absolute, right? The word work is just kind of there. It has meaning, but it's because it's been used with every other word. And so when I'm showing you all of those steps, again, those are not even close to all of the steps. So when I say brute force by logical exhaustion, it's literally just this overwhelming amount of data, and you can just solve these things. But again, sensorality is not even a word, right? So we're just I don't know. You can either do what I can do or you can't. I mean, it's just like, and the level of logical difference is just, it's profoundly tremendous. And so, because I would say that is the biggest thing, is none of these results, they're internally consistent. That is why there's definiteness. That's why they're definitive. But why is rock? Why is dome a house? Why is pueblo other type of house? Why is TP? right? All of those things just have internal consistency. That's why there's no one absolute correct answer as to what you call a house. And so remember, it is truly proof by logical exhaustion, brute force logic. And you have to like swallow up everything. Because there is no absolute meaning in that sense. And so that was a huge poignant thing to point out, because again, I still don't think you guys appreciate, again, identifying these dichotomistic pairs and this consistency to language. It's just because they're used in different contexts, and it's just like, okay, this is what people are saying, but there's no absolute answer or absolute right answer to any of this stuff. Like, there's just internal consistency. And so last time we finished up with this big result in linguistics, that this use of ly at the end of words when it's cumbersome is certainly just some sort of, again, there should be a hyphen in there. Hyphens present themselves because it's this unnatural use of irreducibility of word, and we represent those with letters, and then that irreducibility reflects, and we have to put a hyphen in it. And so things that end in ly, or just to go, again, the iteration of ly in general, slyly, is that direct iteration. But now, again, right, we have words with that direct form. Own, on, only, right? Last, power, the base of power is o, own, only is on with an ly at the end. So like that word construction, only, has a natural hyphen in it. In the same way you say salt, that's salty, and then, right, we're not saying, if I say you're salty, I'm not saying you taste like sodium chloride, I'm saying, you know, you're embarrassed, right? So it has a unique meaning, salt-y. And now we've this generalized result, which I'm not really sure what it is. Again, I've already produced it. I could literally look up my own emails, but re-derived this, right? Now we have the letter y-e, now we have ly. And we can have some sort of completeness because, again, a complete sentence has a noun and a verb. It doesn't have adverbs or adjectives or a word that ends in ly. And so we're showing the completeness of language in complete generality with a specific solution. That's a physical axiom. That's the highest thing that is possible to do with analysis. And so even before we get back to the derivation, so I introduced this in my website is called First Principle Scientist. And so I wanted to address this, that first principle science doesn't really exist because of this, again, complete generality. Again, you're born into a society, you're born into an environment, and you immediately start associating to sounds you hear to actions, to words, to things. And that happens before you start forming crystalline, solidified memories. And so nobody really starts from the first principle. Again, that's just kind of, again, the verbiage that society has produced to say, you know, I'm going to do a complete proof. And so the direct logic of what it means to be from first principle, people really just intuitively mean a complete proof, which still definitely has not been done before, but the right verbiage for that is a complete proof, not from first principle, meaning you start with one single principle. It's like there's just a lot of shit going on and you have to describe it all to a level that shows this linguistic completeness. So quick note on that. But again, the intuition's good enough. So again, when you're seeing all of this derivation, this has been my whole life like this. And so it's like, what part do I tell who, when, where, how? It's just our society is a broken shithole and there's no laws. And so first principle doesn't really make sense because is there just one principle? Well, there's a fundamental stability of two. So again, there's this inherent relationship. Is that first principle, the verbiage just elicits the intuition of, hey, this person's going to do a complete proof, which you guys have never seen before. You have no idea what that looks like. It's this. But it felt important to point that out. And so now, again, we have these word forms, essential, which that seems to be spelled right for now. And that ESS, again, seems to come from like sensorality with an S or sensorality with a C is senseless. Again, some sort of iteration, this double ESS at the front is probably coming from there. Again, that's what we're going to show to complete this proof is this direct iteration of letters. But I wanted to point out, so especially, right, we've proven that there's a natural hyphen in there. So especially is not a word. Special definitely is, and now it's like e-special. Equality, especially equality. But I wanted to point out there was only one S in especially, not two S's like essentially or essential. And so then a special, right, isn't really a word. Put that on the screen. Sensorality is a special. Because again, we have to isolate this unique iteration of letters to have a novel definition. And so sensorality is special-less. And I just put the ESS at the end of special. Sensorality is spaceless. Space is dimension. What the fuck is dimension? Right? Whatever you're talking about conceptually when you say dimension, you mean some aspect of space. Mathematically, logically, completely with our completely known logical structure, the word you're talking about is direction. But sensorality is especial. And then we can restate the fundamental theorem of logic. Analysis processes, right? When I go on my YouTube and click analytics, it's right there. There's my data. Analysis produces data. Type shit. Are we still mewing? We're still mewing? 6, 7? Yeah, I should stop. But probably won't. I don't even know if we're still saying that shit anymore. Who knows? But anyway, and so analysis processes, and so analyticality, again, that ly, or show that some sort of, that was a big step for sure. That was just this morning. But analysis processes, anything that process produces data. What is experience to culture? It just popped up, not going to say any more. Analysis validates expectation. So again, that is, we derive what is the linguistic structure in the process of what you're doing by saying, I am doing science. If this, then that. This process of analysis, which you're doing by existing and not dying, you're analyzing your environment. Is there danger over here? How do I get a job? Oh shit, I'm going to commit super fraud because, you know, I'm a big bitch and I work in academia. But analysis validates or produces expectation. I said something that's similar to that this morning, or at least typed it on the screen. But when you're doing the scientific method, overall, you're trying just to create an expectation value. Not real, well, in this sense, physicists use it, but like generally in what the words mean, because words have meaning. And so, right, because an expectation value is a prediction. If I study the flow of rivers, right, and I can say, well, it's flowing at this velocity and it ends out in this reservoir from this stream, right, I can make a prediction on that. So analysis informs prediction, and that's overall entirely what science is. But again, for analytically, another like structure of that syllability, just the letters that jumped out, the spelling was ally, A-L-Y, add an L, ally. A friend is an ally. Ally only. Allies form allegiance. Allegiance bonds. How big is really big? I don't think anybody knows. Really big is giant. But real, really. See? See how really is the real with an L-Y? So again, this is demonstrating the irreducibility of language. It's really that. That's not even a fucking word. But really big is giant, and really is not a word. These results are massive. Give me my money. Sick fucks. Analyticality, algorithmicality. From rhythm to algorithm. Don't forget, that is a complete theorem that we're iterating with sensorality to prove and demonstrate the complete form of all solutions. Algorithms are analytical. International, iterational, right? International is an iteration of iterational with n squared. An iteration is a version. Verse, version. Inversion is iteration. Ration, version. Sensorality is versionality. Artificial is the opposite of official. What is conservation to preservation? Another huge concept that the two dichotomistic pair that I always return to. Because when people say conservation laws, very naturally when I first did this proofing, which was done again at the linguistic logical level, which was just immediate. It was literally just write down the fucking answers. Which a good thing you guys tortured me for 15 years, telling me, go to school, study this dumb shit. Thanks, guys. But I always wrote preservation, like you preserve dynamic. right? You can't conserve it, right? You conserve mass. This thing can change form, but I can't conserve my life. There's nothing I can do to not die eventually, whether it be in 5 seconds or, how old am I? 32? I don't know, 50 years. I don't know. I don't care. But point being is like you can't conserve your life. Mass is conserved, but to dynamic, the word that makes sense is preservation. You want to preserve what you can. You can't conserve your life. You can't conserve. Nothing golden lasts, pony boy. But that is a dichotomy that always presents in very clearly. Again, we have this word serve. Inverse is serve, conserve, reserve, preserve. And so just pointing out any step that strikes me with this novel and intuitive understanding. But analysis produces data. Data. I also have horosho and harosho, right? Is it, right, tomato, potato? Is there any proof or demonstration in there that it's just the A and the O doing something? Right? Because it always seems to be those vowels, or is it just this dichotomy of pronunciation? There's not, one unique pronunciation or spelling for meaning. And so that was another thing that popped out. Again, if you study Cyrillic specifically, like Russian, Ukrainian, Russians always say like harosho instead of like horosho, just the O vowel, like always like bridge it to an A. And I just keep thinking every time I hear that tomato, potato, is it just this A and the O sound, or is it just some sort of, again, dichotomy within pronunciation? Power is energy velocity. So why is an exponent a power? Right? Power is how fast something can change. And so when you have an exponent, that's the fastest growth a function can undergo, is some sort of exponentiation. And so that seems to be, again, logically, physically consistent, just walking you through every bit of logical or physical realization that I'm having to show you all of the steps, all of the little nuance, because once we close up this proof, again, there's going to be nothing to say. You can find any video, and there's like, you can ask different questions, but again, my rights continue to be violated. Like I said, the derivation process doesn't stop. And literally every single video at this point is just results that nobody has ever seen at a level that is complete generally. To the point where, again, there's no absolute meaning. I'm just demonstrating the self-consistency that Brad, this guy right here, put forth into the world, constructed a not word to show you that words have meaning, but they already have meaning, but they're reducible, and you guys are arrogant dickheads. So it continues to be, again, a violation of every fucking law that's ever existed. And again, what you guys are realizing is these videos, again, are the ontology for everybody. If I die right now today, it doesn't even fucking matter. Part 296 sitting on the internet, it's already a done deal. I just have to find, again, to keep cycling through this trivial amounts of linguistics to get to the stabilizing syllability, which is the absolute end that could exist for this proof. But at this point, the amount of results that have proven, I could hang my hat on the wall and say a life well lived. And then I can realize, oh shit, I've already done this whole fucking process. But that is what you arrogant dickheads didn't understand. When I get born into a world and everyone's running around saying dark energy and dark matter and I don't even know what the fuck a line is. Like there's a lot of shit you can solve immediately. And then you solve it all and then you just have to reiterate that entire logical structure. Which I do want to point out historically. I can totally see why somebody, frankly, I do not see anybody even remotely close in history to have the initial, to be able to do what I did the first time. And after the first time done, there was no like speciality is special with an ITY. That's where you start, really. But again, like there's no first principle. You start by being born into a world with logic associated to sound. And so, or at least to experience even. And so you could definitely solve all of science, which is infinitely past any logical structure I've ever seen anybody even remotely get close to doing. And again, solving all of science is verbiage that really does make kind of sense. And so, and then but again, the data came way before. Again, it comes from the muddling around of all people interacting over history. And then you solve it all. And so it's a very clear, like that would be like why other people couldn't do this process independently again. For me, it is very clear it is just a physical limit. Time has to pass. Enough information has to be generated. The actual proofing to reduction is trivial. It just is. And so I keep wanting to point that out, as you could literally derive and demonstrate the all logical structure ever known and then like totally be stuck. But with my attenuation to language, there's no end. There just isn't. Point being is that not to say Brad's cool, that's to say I am being tortured. I need some money so I can live a life. I'm going to be 33 this year. I have been tortured my entire life. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.